Thank everyone for coming out again tonight. This is the 8th lecture in our series this fall on Vietnam, and we have covered a wide berth of information, and we've done it a little differently than we've done other lectures in the past. A lot of times you'll get a lecture on military history in terms of chronological order, in terms of battles. This time we chose to do it by the different branches of the military. And so if you've been with us from the very beginning, you'll know that we started out with an overview of how we got involved in the Vietnam conflict, Vietnam War. Then we went from there into the Army. Then we went to the Army nurses. We have covered the Navy. We've covered the Marines. We've covered the Air Force. And tonight we're going to be talking to these two fine gentlemen. Our last two lectures of the series after this will be on the home front. And it'll be done by Ron Janowski. And Ron will be here. Oh, and I forgot to say we also did the Coast Guard in Vietnam. Another unknown that a lot of people don't know anything about. Next week, it'll be on the home front during Vietnam. It'll be done by Ron Janowski. Ron will be here. And as any of you that have known Ron and seen him speak, he's a phenomenal speaker. Then our last lecture of the season will be on November 15th. And we will have Fred Johnson here, and he will wrap it up about how the end of Vietnam has influenced all future military operations in the United States since that point. The pros and the cons. And he will tie up the whole series. For those of you that are wondering, our spring lecture series will start on the 3rd Monday in February. And our 10-week series on that will be about the entire military history of the United States in the Pacific during World War II. We will start from Vietnam and go all the way to the Tokyo trials in that 10-week period. And we'll look at it across the board, all of the major battles, and I'm still working on getting some of those speakers, but it looks like each and every one of them, if the world stays nice and calm and nothing crazy happens again, we'll all be in person and we'll be able to continue. As we start every program here at the Silver Sides, we begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Those of you that are capable, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Those of you that were here last week, our speaker had these books sent to us, and it's about the 10,000-Day War. It's the Navy in Vietnam. I have a few extra copies, and they're in the back of the room. So if anyone has a friend or a family member that would be very interested in having it, please feel free to take one at the back of the room. We're more than happy to share. Their only request is that we get them into the hands of people who are interested in the subject and who will make a difference. And so therefore, please feel free to take a copy at the back of the book, at the back of the room when you're ready to leave. Next slide, please. As all of you know, the USS Silverside Submarine Museum is a nonprofit. We are a 501c3 and we do not receive any funding from state, federal, or local sources. All of our funding comes through the kind and generous donations of the community that we live in and through gift shop sales and admissions. You know every day when you walk here and you come here, you see the great preservation we work in keeping our vessels afloat. This year on December 15th, the USS Silverside will celebrate its 80th anniversary of being commissioned. Wow. Now, if any of you and the Coast Guard Clutter McLean will be celebrating her 93rd birthday in April. Now, any of you that have an older home can understand that it takes a lot to maintain those vessels. And we work very hard, very diligently, and to make sure that they will stand there for the next generation so that they can tell the stories and they can show people the price it was for all of our veterans who did so much and asked for so little when they came back. And to learn the stories of each and every individual that walked on them and to be able to understand. Because it's very hard to understand history when you know absolutely nothing about it. And the mission here at the Silversides is simple. It's to honor our veterans, and we do that through preservation and education. It's very hard to honor something that you know nothing about. You're sitting in one of our wonderful educational programs that we have, and we offer about 25 lectures on military history every year, as well as we offer STEM classes for young people, because we find that when a young person is actively engaged in the class, and then we take them out to tour the vessels and start telling the stories, suddenly they're engaged. Instead of it being just, oh gosh, one more boring history thing I gotta go do. It's more like, wow, I remember how those torpedoes work. That was air pressure, and they showed us how that worked. Or that periscope, man, that was awful cool. There's so many mirrors in there, and they were able to do this without the aid of modern computers. And then we tell them about the first computer that was designed so that they could properly shoot the torpedoes, and so that they would be able to do the math calculations quickly and easily. They become engaged, and it's through them that they suddenly then start to appreciate, and that helps us serve our mission. And then the preservation is another key point. Every day we work very hard to make sure our vessels are here for the next generation. So we thank all of you for that, and we thank you and the community here for supporting us and allowing us to do this. Our series sponsor is the Lorraine and Fred F. Bursch Foundation. They were a wonderful couple that met during World War II. They were both in active duty military. And after they returned from the war, they came back to Holland, Michigan. They both entered into careers of public service. They feel very strongly about that the key to a good community is community service. But the key to good community service is in education. And so they are very proud to support the educational offerings at the Silversides. Next slide, please. Blue Lake Public Radio is our media sponsor. They are a very wonderful radio station. I hope many of you listen to them. And they absolutely do a fabulous job of letting people know about the activities that are going on here at the museum. Next slide. I've talked to you already about that this is the 8th lecture in our 10-week lecture series on Vietnam. And that it's amazing when you think you know something on a subject and you realize you know nothing at all. You just know the very tip of the little bit of the iceberg. And there's so much more to learn. And so we're so excited when we can have wonderful speakers here like this that can tell us the stories, the first-hand accounts, so that we can share them with others. And we appreciate that. Next slide, please. And here is tonight's presentation. In one moment, I will let Amber do their introductions. One more slide. Next week's speaker, as I previously mentioned, is Ron Janowski, and he's going to be talking about the home front in Vietnam. So, without further ado, I will turn this over to Amber. She is our archivist, and she works very hard at the museum keeping all the artifacts in place.
Hello, welcome. I don't think a lot of us have met before because I'm not normally here on Mondays, but it's a special night because about 2 years ago, in November of 2019, before the world changed, right? I was doing research for an exhibit that we had about corpsmen and chaplains. And I'm doing all of this research and I'm looking around and I wound up at a very well-known website called YouTube, right? We've heard of it. Great stuff there. And I put in the search bar, I said, corpsman. And all of a sudden, I get this guy that pops up. And he's talking about his experience in Vietnam. And he's talking about how he was caught in this ambush and that he patched guys up and he wound up with the Silver Star. And I said, man, I gotta talk to this guy. So, again, I, went to Google. And I typed his name in. And sure enough, guess what? Mike over there, he did not make his telephone number private. So I look him up on the white pages and I said, you know what? I'm just gonna give him a call on the phone. And I did. Now, I wasn't sure if he was going to talk to me, but he'd done an interview before, so I thought maybe my luck was going to be all right. So I called him out of the blue, and I said, hi, I'm from a museum in Michigan, and I want to talk to you about Vietnam. And, well, that's either going to go one of two ways, right? Really well or really badly. Thankfully, it went well, and I got him all the way here. But anyways, he was going to come, oh gosh, right before the world turned on us. right? Literally right before, about, you know, you were supposed to come, and I think we canceled 2 days before because that's when everything shut down. But now he's here, and we're excited. So Mike is here, as well as Steve Vineyard. Now Steve graduated from Corpsman School with Mike. They were both in Vietnam at the same time, but they only saw each other, was it once?
Yeah.
Yes, and then they reconvened in the 80s at a movie theater, but I can let you talk about that later. Now,
It's not what you think.
now, both of these individuals were wounded in Vietnam, and I am going to leave it to them to tell their stories because it's an important story, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So, Mike and Steve.
You need to definitely use the mic so that our people on Zoom can hear you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Peggy, you're in charge. Can you all hear okay?
It is.
Okay. I'm Mike Kuklenski. I'm from Dallas, Texas area. Steve Vineyard is from Oklahoma, like some of you heard just a few minutes ago. We really appreciate being here. I haven't done a speech or presentation in at least, oh, it's not on? It's on.
Hold it up.
Oh,
There you go.
I'm a corpsman. What do you want? Anyway, again, I'm from Dallas, Texas. He's from Oklahoma. And like you just heard, we're both in Corps School together, Hospital Corpsman School in San Diego, California, in 1968. We graduated in the same class, and about a year later, we ran into each other just by coincidence in Vietnam. We lost contact with each other, never saw each other again until 1982. And ever since 1982, we've been best of friends, we've been in businesses together, we've had all types of other memorable exercises in life. And so here we are today, so that'll kind of give you a background on that a little bit. I was a combat corpsman with the Marine Corps, Alpha Company 17 in Vietnam. Landed May 1st, 1969, and what's significant about that is April 30th, if you look at the history books, that's when the very last buildup of troops were in Vietnam at 554,000. All right, that's when I landed. 29 days later, May 29th, 1969, a year to the day that we graduated from Corps School together, is when me and my unit got overrun by over 100. We had 30, and that's when I got wounded. With the unit I was with, we were part of an operation in Vietnam called Operation Oklahoma Hills. It was a 2-month search and destroy mission, and April 29th, 1969 was the very last day of that operation. And according to the history books, we roughly had 50 of ours killed in action, and we killed over 600. So I guess from that perspective, it was kind of a successful operation, if you will. What I'm going to do real briefly, Seymour says you can't do anything briefly, is give you a little bit of background on corpsmen and medics, and a little bit of the background and history of that, and World War II, and a few other things. And eventually I'll be telling you my real life story about what happened to me and the process of becoming a corpsman. Okay? So with that in mind, we've all heard the figure of 58,000 that were killed in Vietnam, right? A lot of you have heard that number. It's a little bit misleading because 58,000 weren't killed in Vietnam. 58,000 died in Vietnam. And there's a big difference. Out of the 58,000, roughly 41,000 of our soldiers were killed in action. And these numbers aren't exact, but it's close enough. Another 5,000 plus died from their wounds in action. So that's about 47,000. What a lot of people don't realize is there are a lot of others, thousands of others, that died from other causes. Anything from accidents, vehicular accidents, and jeeps, airplane, helicopter crashes, things like that. And that was in the thousands. There's things like vehicular accidents and fires and things like that. There were homicides. There's a couple hundred homicides where veterans killed each other. There were suicides, 300 or 400 suicides in Vietnam. And malaria and hepatitis and other types of diseases and viruses and things like that that make up that 58,000. So, and this is stuff that the corpsmen and the medical field had to deal with. I don't care if they're out in the field on the front lines in combat or not. These are some of the other conditions that the troops died from that we had to deal with as corpsmen. So I hope that gives you kind of an idea that not all 58,000 were on the front lines and got killed being in combat, because it just wasn't so. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, Jerry, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. And it's amazing, there's one area I put up here, stupid. Okay, and that's not referring to Steve, it's just someone I can tell you about. In one of the books I have over here, Some Gave It All by Danny Lane, and Danny Lane's a real good friend of a guy who y'all probably know, Chuck Norris, the karate guy. Okay, they're both best of friends. And in his book, he tells about an incident. He wasn't a corpsman, he was a Marine. And in his book, he tells about a particular instance of a brand new guy in country, and the new guys in country were kind of warned about a couple of things. Number one, don't kick any beer cans or coffee cans or Coca-Cola cans that you see on the road, because it may be a bomb. The other thing is, don't buy any Cokes, water, or booze from the villagers, the people in the village, because more than likely they're going to lace it with broken glass, and that broken glass will kill you. Well, this new guy by the name of Parker, he didn't believe him. He was new in country. He was proud that he bought a bottle of rum, took a couple of swigs, they told him not to, and within minutes, he was just bleeding from the mouth and everything. He died within a minute or two. And they called the corpsman, and there was nothing the corpsman could do. And it comes under the category of stupid. But the thing is, the government doesn't write back, oh, your son died is because he was stupid. Instead, they write unexplained. We can't explain why your son died in combat. Died in Vietnam. So that's why I put the thing up there, stupid. And it happened more than once. I'm just referring to at least one episode. You keep shaking your head. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I can totally understand what you're saying.
Okay, good. So that's why I put up here what I did. There were fraggings that took place where we didn't like an officer or somebody else. They got killed one way or another. All right, you either stayed in step sometimes or you didn't. And if you didn't, you might pay the price, and it wasn't from the VC. It's from one of your fellow soldiers. So that gives you an idea that the 58,000 didn't all get killed again. And 58,000 died in Vietnam, and another 300,000 plus were injured in Vietnam. Okay, they suffered wounds and everything. It's almost a 5-to-1, 6-to-1 ratio from killed as opposed to wounded in action. Okay, so the numbers are kind of staggering once you come to think about it. The Corps, the medical corps for the Army, came in effect in 1887. Okay, that was Army, and all the Army medical personnel are normally referred to as medics. Are there any medics in the room by chance? Okay. 11 years later, 1898, that's when the Navy officially set up their medical corps facilities, and they're known as corpsmen. But they weren't always known as corpsmen. Back in the day, long before, they were known as loblolly boys. And it's a crazy name, and I'm going to explain to you the meaning, but it progressed from 1898 from lob boy to a couple other names. In World War II, they were known as pharmacist mates. All right? In 1948, 50 years after the Corps was set up, they officially became hospital corpsmen. And they've been that way ever since until 2016, where the Secretary of the Navy decided we don't need to have corpsmen or hospitalmen or engineermen or yeomen. Anything with men or man at the end of the title needed to be done away with. So he suggested, they're hospital corps specialists or medics or something more generic. Well, that was in September of 2016. He got so much blowback from it, from military personnel, active and retired, and politicians, that in December of that year, President Obama would not allow it, and it went back to being hospital corpsmen and the other job description titles. So even today, we're recognized as hospital corpsmen, but it wasn't always that way. In World War II, I told you that they had what they called pharmacist mates. And in the war zone, they actually wore red crosses on their sleeves. And according to the Geneva Convention, they weren't supposed to be shot at or killed. But over 1,100 corpsmen were actually killed in World War II, despite the Geneva Convention. I don't think the Japanese and Germans could read the Geneva Convention very well, nor did they care. But over 1,100 corpsmen were killed in World War II. Now, I don't know much about the numbers for the medics in the Army and everything, because I wasn't in there and I didn't do the research. But that'll give you an idea. In Vietnam, over 600 corpsmen were killed. Over 1,400 medics were killed. Well, that's over 2,000. If you put it in perspective, that means 1 out of every 29 people that are listed on the wall are corpsmen or medics. So corpsmen and medics suffered a great deal in Vietnam. There are roughly over 10,000 corpsmen in Vietnam. Out of that, I just said over 600 got killed. Over 3,300 were wounded. So you do the math, you figure out corpsman was not a very good job to have, all right? Because they were right in the line of fire, especially the ones that were out in the field. And one thing that's significant about what I just said about being in the field, for every corpsman or even every soldier that was on the front lines or in combat, there were anywhere from 5, 10, maybe 15 others who acted in a support role. They were called rear echelon personnel, and they acted in a support role. You know what it really is. Acted in a support role. So if you hear about someone who says, oh yeah, I was in Vietnam, the question is, were you in combat or were you in the rear as a support unit? And that's no disrespect for anybody, that's just the way it was. That was your job, all right? So maybe that helps you out a little bit on understanding the difficulty and exposure that the corpsmen and the soldiers on the front line had, as opposed to the other, whatever the numbers are, that acted in a support role. That makes sense? Okay. In World War II, how many of you maybe have seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge? Okay, Desmond Doss. He was the first recipient of the Medal of Honor, being a medic in the Army that was a conscientious objector. And the reason why his story was told in film by Mel Gibson, if you haven't seen the movie, real quickly, he was 25, 26 years old. He was a medic in the Army, conscientious objector, refused to carry a weapon, and as a result of his action of saving 70, 75 of his fellow soldiers, received the Medal of Honor. In Vietnam, there were 2 medics that were killed, and they received Medals of Honors, and they were both conscientious objectors too. But since they were killed, their stories were never told. One happened in February of 1969, and the other was a couple days after I got wounded. And so there were 2 other Medal of Honor medics who were Medal of Honor recipients that were conscientious objectors. As far as I know, there's never been a Navy corpsman that received a Medal of Honor that was a conscientious objector. And on the hospital corpsman side, there's only been 1 hospital corpsman that I could find that was a female, and she was killed in the Iraqi freedom thing back in the early 2000s. She was on a Humvee and got killed, and several other patients or other soldiers were killed also. So that'll kind of give you an idea of that, if you will. We're in Muskegon, and there's a website called the Caulfield Data. And I'm going to be alluding to stuff on the table here in a minute, but there's a website you can go to and find the names, rank, serial numbers, and a whole bunch of information about every single one of the 58,000 that got killed or either died in Vietnam. And it'll take you from their names, first name, last name, city and state, the unit they were with. Great information. And the reason I bring that up, because here in Michigan, it was the 7th largest casualty rate of all the 50 states, like 2,657 or something like that. And of course, other states like Texas, New York, larger states had more, but Michigan was number 7 on the list. And I did further research specifically to Muskegon, And 40, from what the information is, 40 were killed from Muskegon, 4 from Muskegon Heights, and only 1 from a place called, is it North Muskegon? North Muskegon. Out of those 45, only 1 was a corpsman. And in the state of Michigan, there were roughly 60 corpsmen that were killed in Vietnam. So that's the type of information that you can gather from the website, and that information will be up here on a piece of paper for you to do your own research on, and so you don't have to come up here and write it all down yourself. I'm sure there's other stuff I could tell you, but my story and how a corpsman or how someone becomes a corpsman, I went to the Navy, obviously, and I was in boot camp, Navy boot camp, and I'd requested to be a corpsman. So I went to Corps School in San Diego for about 16 weeks, and you got all types of medically related training, first aid, pharmacology, you name it, okay, anatomy and physiology. Upon graduation from Corps School, and this is the normal process back then, from boot camp to Corps School, and then I was assigned a Navy hospital there in San Diego, and I worked on a pediatric ward. So for about 8 or 9 months, I worked with kids. Some of them had cancer, some of them had meningitis, some of them were child abuse cases. This is what I did before I got orders to go to the FMF or Fleet Marine Force and go with them. When that happens, the corpsmen that are assigned FMF go to something like another boot camp. And it's either 8 or 9 weeks, and you learn the ways of the Marines and armaments and whatever Marines are supposed to learn. I didn't learn them very well.
Because you were a non-combatant.
Yeah, and I was a non-combatant. I was a conscientious objector also. Refused to carry a weapon. I only fired a weapon 1 time in their camp, and that was rather reluctantly. And then I got shipped out to Vietnam. So like I said, I landed May 1st, which was historical in the fact that it's the last buildup. 29 days later, my unit of 30, we got surrounded by over 100, and now the 30, roughly 29 of us were wounded. 4 got killed on me right away. I was the only corpsman with the unit, and in the process of going around patching the guys up, I got hit 3 times. I got hit both legs and both arms. And I could get in all the details about that, but I'm not going to bore you with what actually happened. But suffice it to say, we were in a hell of a firefight, and only because a reinforcement group came in and rescued us and got us medevaced out am I here to even talk about it today. And thank you. That's how I got a Silver Star. They put me in for a higher award, but I got a Silver Star. And for those who have never seen an actual Purple Heart or Silver Star, on this table up here you can actually see what they are, okay? And you can feel them and touch them and get an idea if you've never seen one or held one. They're up here. A lot of the information that I gathered for presenting to you tonight come from the books on the table. And I encourage you to look at the titles and understand they're from corpsmen, they're from Marines, they're ones that are actually in combat. And I've taken the liberty of writing the titles of every book, the authors of the book, so that you don't have to stand up here and make your own list and everything. So each and everything that you might want to know about those, just take the list and look it up yourself if you want to.
Well, Mike, let me jump in here. How much training did we go through? You mentioned Corps School and FMF, but just how long was that training?
8 weeks? Is that what it was?
16 weeks for Corps School.
Yeah.
And 7 to 9 weeks for FMF.
Yeah.
And then we went straight to Vietnam.
Yeah. Our training was intense before we went, but we had no idea what to expect when we got there. My 3rd day in country, I was being shot at. My 4th day in country, I was involved in a mortar attack situation. There's a few other things in between. My 21st day in country, the worst case that I ever treated was a guy who had both legs blown off. And me and another corpsman morphed him up, which means we gave him a lot of morphine, and tied his legs off so he wouldn't bleed to death. And we successfully medevaced him out, and to my knowledge, he's still alive today. All right? And the story behind that, if you don't know it, because there's a little bit more to it, is an explosion went off, and I'm sitting reading a letter from a girlfriend of mine from the States. Explosion goes off, and all of a sudden I look up and I see a boot flying overhead, and it's got part of a leg in it. And immediately I hear, Corpsman up, Corpsman up. So I run to the front of the formations. Doc, explosion, Marine down. So I go to take off to run across this field, and the CO grabs and said, you can't do that, Doc, it's all full of landmines. And I said, well, I don't care. Corpsmen don't necessarily think as much as they just react to what the situation is. Okay? Here you are, you're sitting there, bullets are flying everywhere, landmines are going on, whatever's going on, and you don't sit there and say, you know, I think I'll wait till things die down. No, you just react and go take care of what you're supposed to do. If they say Corpsman up or medic, you respond. That was their job. That's what we did. That's what Steve did. That's what I did. And fortunately, I got away with it. Anyway, I come upon the scene, and this guy's in a little bit of a crater from the explosion, and he's trying to dig himself out. The other corpsman was already there. His name was Jim Goss. He's from Pennsylvania. And so Jim and I pulled him out of the hole. We morph him up, and we start tying off his legs and doing all this other stuff. And all of a sudden, the guy starts singing Happy Birthday and asking for his mama. He's African American, and if you don't know, but in Vietnam, it seemed like every time I was around an African American who got wounded, they were always yelling and screaming for either their mama or their mommy. It was never their mother. Okay, that's just how it was. So he's yelling and screaming for his mom or his mommy and his what I just said. I just went blank because I'm trying to think of it. Anyway, he's yelling and screaming. Then all of a sudden he became quiet. The morphine kicked in, and he started singing Happy Birthday. And I'm looking at Jim where they're treating him. Jim, what the heck's going on? He said, well, this is Smitty. Today's his 21st birthday. And I'm going, huh? He said, yeah, it's his 21st birthday today. And it just registered that it's his 21st birthday, and he's singing Happy Birthday to himself, asking us to get him back to his mom. Steve can share his story a little bit. He was wounded on his 21st birthday. Okay, so that was my 21st day in country. Welcome to Vietnam. 8 days later is when my unit got overrun, and in between I was involved in some other firefights and skirmishes and in combat, being, you know, having other guys wounded and me treating them and things like that. I'm kind of glossing over this because I don't want to get too emotional about what all took place and what I kind of had to do, I guess. But I'm going to encourage you not only to look over the material on this desk or this table, but also all the material that's out there on the other table on your way in. Help yourself. I had that flown in from wherever it came in from. They graciously gave me the material, the brochures and everything. So I want you to take a couple of copies of everything. You'll learn about the nurses in Vietnam. Okay, and I know you had a presentation a couple of months ago about nurses. Out of the thousands of women that were in Vietnam, 85–90% were nurses. But out of those thousands, only 8 died in Vietnam. 5 died in crashes, 1 died from a stroke, and the other 1 died from a virus. But out of those thousands, there was only 1. Her name is Sharon Lane. She was only in the country for a couple of months, and she caught shrapnel from a rocket round and got killed. She's the only nurse that was ever killed in action in Vietnam. She received a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star for her actions. That's in the brochure. There were chaplains in Vietnam, and there's a brochure about them. Unfortunately, there's not a brochure about corpsmen, but there's a brochure having to do with chaplains. 16 chaplains died or were killed in Vietnam. 3 of them received the Medal of Honor for what they did to help other soldiers out. So this is all in some of that material that's on the table, and I'm going to encourage you to take what you want of it and share it with somebody else so they can have an understanding, maybe an appreciation for other people who were in the military at the time in Vietnam. Fair enough? Okay. Now, some of you may be old enough. I'm not, but I heard about it. Do any of you remember this edition of Life magazine in 1969? What they did was Life magazine decided, you know, it's one thing for the newspapers to write that 100 were killed in Vietnam this week, 200 died in Vietnam this week. They said, why don't we do something different? Instead of just printing the number, they decided to show the public who these people were behind the numbers. And that week in Vietnam, 242 were killed in combat. And they put their picture through 14 pages or whatever it is here in that edition, and it became controversial for some and thankful for others. And out of this, there's 14 that are from the state of Michigan. And you can look through this, and I highlighted all the ones from Michigan, they're underlined. But this was a way to kind of drive home to the public at the time, and a lot of the public was against Vietnam, to kind of highlight and further drive home what the numbers really represented. So if you're not familiar with this, you can thumb through this to us up on the table. The day that was so significant about Sharon Lane getting killed was June 8th, 1969. Well, that was the same day that President Nixon announced the first troop withdrawal. The day before that, June 7th, is when a guy by the name of Bullock was killed. What's significant about that is he's 15 years old. He was the youngest veteran to be killed in Vietnam. He lied about his age, and he was in the military, the Marine Corps at 14. And it was his 21st day in country and his first time in combat, and he was killed. So there's a lot of things that happened in the month of May 69 and June 69 from a historical standpoint. And some of this information is in the literature that you can pick up on your way out. Okay? Steve, what else do you want to add?
My story's a little different. Michael was with the ground unit, and they've seen a lot of action. I was with the 1st Recon Battalion. So the difference was we went out to find the enemy, their supply routes, other troop movement, other base camps. But we worked in 8 to 13 men patrols, you know, a platoon. So it was much safer for us, simply because we were outnumbered, outgunned, and therefore we didn't want to be detected. On this particular patrol, how I got wounded on my 21st birthday, we were in an 8-man patrol, and actually one of the guys stepped on a booby trap, an 81 Mike mortar, and 4 of us were wounded out of the 8. So I patched him up. One guy had his M16 blowed up through his hand, and his right leg ended up losing his right leg. And another guy got wounded in his groin, and another in his hand, and I was wounded in the right arm. So I got by, luckily, because I could treat them guys, and we got medevac. That was one incident. For an old country boy from Kansas that turned around and got out of high school and volunteered, enlisted for 4 years. Basically what happened after the enlistment boot camp, and different from Mike going from boot camp right into Corps school, I got stationed aboard an LST, just like this one parked out here, or moored, I should say. I was aboard the USS Bullock County, LST 509, and we shipped straight out to Vietnam once I reported aboard ship. And so we operated off the coast of Vietnam for almost 18 months. It was in a war zone, and so I drew hazardous duty pay, but I was not going aboard as a hospital corpsman. What I come out of boot camp was a quartermaster. And a quartermaster, you know, plots the course and, you know, maneuvers the ship, etc., etc. Well, Chief Bosa's mate met me at the, basically when I reported aboard, and the first thing he told me was, we don't need a quartermaster. What we need more Bosa's mate. And so if you're not familiar with Bosa's mate, in the Navy, Bosa's mate get to chip the paint and grease the winches and do all the necessary maintenance to the ship. So, I mean, it's a necessary occupation, right? But you know, you're basically doing all the hard labor. So I'm in here for 4 years, so I said, this ain't going to work. So needless to say, you don't have, I'm an E2, you know, just coming out of boot camp. What my choices was I stood my watches and painted the ship and greased the winches, but on my free time, I was down in sick bay. And aboard this LST, there was 102 personnel, and that included the officers as well as the enlisted. 102 with one corpsman. One corpsman took care of the whole ship. And that corpsman was an E5, which is second class. So that's how much experience we've been talking about, the training, etc., etc. As short as it was, but still considered better trained than any of the Army medics, and that's truth. And so I spent my off hours down there in sick bay learning about what he was teaching me, OJT training. I ordered the courses for Hospital Corps School, completed the courses, sent them off, got approved, and got the commanding officer's approval from the ship. And so I was able to leave the LST and go straight to Corps School, and that's the reason in the picture, one of the reasons I was one of the leaders of the company was because I had prior experience, and I'd already been elevated from E2 to E3. But again, Michael, you know, it's entirely different because of the action that they actually saw and experienced, and again, they were looking for the enemy and they were going to engage, and the difference was, even though it was 1st Recon Battalion and we went out on patrols, we did set up, you know, an observation post, and we'd be on top of a ridge line, and we'd run off. It was a base camp, and of course we took incoming, that type of thing. So I treated the injuries there, but then we would also, normally there was a ville just below us sometimes, and we would actually fire into that ville because we seen Viet Cong and RVNs, and of course they probed us at this type of thing. But the villagers a lot of times would be wounded from the shrapnel and the fires from napalm or whatever, and then they would come up to the base camp for me to treat. So not only was I treating my own troops, but I was treating the injured from, of course, you know, you couldn't tell whether they were enemy or not. You know, they were all the same, but again, that's what we did. We actually treated the enemy. And, in our rear, here's the difference, one of the big differences. In the rear, when we were not selected to be on patrol, or we were not on OP, observation post, for 30 days, then we were in the rear area, and we had hooches, we had cots to sleep on, we had a commissary, you know, hot meals, and that was what was so much different than what Mike experienced with 1-7. And so I have really respected him a lot over the years, and because of that, of the experiences, and now I think that's the reason we're such good friends too, is I realize what he experienced compared to what I experienced. But it all turned out well, and so we've been friends since he looked me up in that movie theater he mentioned earlier. And here we are. I'm sitting in a movie, and he shouts. First, he walks into the movie theater and just wants to find out where I'm at, and he turns around and actually just slips by and calls my name out and tracks me down, and we've been through business and friendship ever since.
Steve would go out with the recon unit, and he'd be out for 7 to 10 days. No cleaning, no showers, no washing, nothing. They were on patrols. They were looking for the, where the Viet Cong were, so he could send in other troops to wipe them out essentially. A lot of the corpsmen, if you stayed in the Navy after Corps School, you were referred to as Blue Side, which means you were still in the Navy. But if you were assigned to FMF and spent time with the Marines, it was called Green Side Corpsman. And if you spent time with the Marines and were under the FMF banner, you got to wear that little, whatever you call it, pin up there that distinguishes you from a Blue Side Corpsman. And the Marines respect the heck out of the Green Side Corpsmen, the ones who served with the Marines. They still respect the Blue Side, but not nearly as much as the ones that served in combat with them. Big, big difference. And if anyone's in the Marine Corps here, or was in the Marine Corps here, move your head and go, yeah, you know what you're talking about. No one's from the Marine Corps, so you don't believe a word I'm saying, do you? Okay, well, we'll go there. Corpsmen, over the years, since the Civil War, over 2,000 of them have been killed. And corpsmen have been in just about every major landing, every major operation, every major conflict that we've had. In Vietnam, there was a kind of a battle, and the reason I bring it up because it was a recon unit of 18. And out of the 18, 2 of them were corpsmen. And it was Hill 488. And the reason I'm bringing this up because 2 corpsmen were in it, and it is the most highly decorated single unit in the history of the Navy and probably in the history of the military. Out of the 18, every single one of them was wounded, some more than once. 6 got killed. Out of the 18, and why they're recognized as the single most decorated unit, single unit, 1 Medal of Honor, 4 Navy Crosses, 13 Silver Stars, and every one of them got a Purple Heart, obviously. So 18 out of 18 got the top 3 awards, Medal of Honor, Navy Cross, and Silver Star. And that's why they're titled that way. They did a movie and a book and everything else about them. And the Corps, the Navy Corps, is the most highly decorated job description in all of the Navy. In their history, something like 22 Medal of Honors, almost 180 Navy Crosses, 950 plus Silver Stars, and over 1,500 Bronze Stars. That's pretty significant. The corpsmen, it seemed like, how do I say this politely? They were in a lot of dog doo-doo, and they paid for it tremendously over the years. So I was told I had to be polite, so I know. So there's a lot more that we could share with you about personal experiences and various situations. Like one night I was with 8 or 9 other Marines, and we came under fire, and we got pinned down, and 3 other guys got wounded. I didn't get wounded that night, but the only reason we got out of that was because reinforcements finally came in. And I could share a whole bunch of little stories like that and incidences that took place, but why don't we just do this? Why don't, if there's any questions or comments or cheers or jeers that you all have, I'm going to turn it over to y'all and we'll answer any questions that you have.
Well, I'd like to add one more thing, Michael. We left Vietnam, but Vietnam didn't leave us. Yeah. I said we left Vietnam, but Vietnam didn't leave us. I was diagnosed with leukemia in 2017, and so that from Agent Orange exposure. So we operated in areas that had been sprayed, and a lot of us carry that. Mike has a heart condition and PTSD, both of us. Again, it's something we'll never forget. It's ingrained, but we are better, and that's the good news.
When I got wounded May 29, 1969, I went to the main hospital in Da Nang. And I'd been wounded in both legs and both arms. When I first got wounded, I did not know I was hit in this arm, but I knew I was hit in this leg because I couldn't walk. So I crawled around patching the guys up, got medevaced out, went to the Da Nang hospital. That's where they medevaced me. And when I woke up, I'm in complete leather restraints from head to toe. Can't feel anything from my waist down. And there's 2 corpsmen that I look up to, and they're 2 corpsmen that graduated with he and I in the same corps class. They had been instructed to talk to me instead of the doctor. And I just found this out about 3 or 4 days ago. They were instructed to tell me, because they knew me, they knew about my athletic accomplishments in high school and all this. And they said, Mike says, you recovered from the surgeries, but you may never walk again. And if you do, you're going to have a limp for the rest of your life, so your athletic career is over with. And I said, why am I in leather restraints? I said, well, you had a bad reaction to the anesthesia, and we didn't know how you'd react coming out of it, so we had to tie you down so you wouldn't tear out all the IVs and everything, which made sense. And that person who told me that, his name is Ted Kuklenski. He just retired some years ago over in Wyandotte, Michigan, as the chief of the fire department over there. He's the corpsman who told me that. And he said, this is what the doctor told us to tell you. And they said, you guys tell him because you know him. I said, just let me unstrap me. Let me reach down to feel that I have my legs. Because seriously, I didn't know if I had them at the time. They unstrapped my arm. I reached down, felt that I had it. And I said, don't worry, guys. Won't be too long. I'll be getting up and walking. And I did, and here I am today and don't have those lingering problems, even though I do have some other leg issues, but I'm walking without a limp. So there's that. After I was in that hospital in Dandang, they flew me to Japan, to Yokosuka, Japan, for more surgeries and more recuperation. And while I was there, they called my folks at home. The Red Cross had set up a call with my folks back in Independence, Missouri. And I talked to them, and they told them how badly I was injured and everything. I said, we're going to be sending your son home within a week or 2. Well, about a week into it, they called me in and said, we changed your orders. You're going back to Vietnam. I went back to Vietnam for 9 more months. I didn't go out in the field every day, but I was with headquarters, and every 3rd day, I would go on patrol with the Marines. So, you talk about an attitude, a bad attitude after that. I had it. Yes. And some people say it's never left me.
That's true.
And those people are 90% true, or correct. The other 10% I don't talk to. So, went back to Vietnam for 9 more months. When I got through with that, I finished up my tour of duty with the Navy in Albany, Georgia at a naval air station. Then I got released, and that's my Vietnam story. So, and I'm sure as I keep talking, I'll think of other things, but any question, come on, y'all talk. Your turn. Somebody say something. All right, y'all go home. Help yourself to all the literature and reading over the book material and all that. And seriously, nobody has a question?
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
So, when you did come home, and this is kind of leading into our discussion of next week about the home front. When you did come home, how difficult was it for you to adjust? And you say that you never really leave that behind. And so...
Well, I didn't adjust very well at all. Of course, by going back to a small country town and, you know, a smaller community, I didn't run into the, other than at the airport, where we were met with baby killer, etc., etc. I mean, negative terms and... but when I got back to the community, I didn't have any of that. You know, farming community, rural, and they just, I didn't talk about it. And just like it was said earlier, we didn't come back in uniform. We came back in civvies. Suggested, encouraged not to wear your uniform. And that's what we did. But with me, it cost me a marriage, PTSD, alcohol abuse, I actually went through treatment in 2017 at a VA hospital in Topeka, Kansas, and basically went through PTS treatment, the program, and that was instrumental. It's helped because I'm an isolationist. This is
This is out of his wheelhouse, believe me.
You ain't a kidding. When I, you know, in and out of jobs, couldn't keep a job. The wife just wanted me to forget about my experience and move on. You've got me, and I have 2 daughters, and I was just supposed to get in the, you know, the family and a job and all of that, and I just couldn't put it behind me. So after we were married 10 years, so we were married in '72, and I just got back from, well, actually what happened, but prior to that is I actually got released from, I did my 4 years and got out in 1970, but I was getting arrested and again the alcohol abuse, so I decided the military messed me up, so I'll go back into the military. And of course, you know,
He's a slow learner.
Yeah, the war wasn't over, and of course, because I was so proud of serving with the Marines, that relationship between hospital corpsmen and Marines, and that's about the only sailors they really care about, to be honest with you. I went to the recruiter and I volunteered for FMF, and I said, listen, if you'll put with the Marines again, I'll sign up for another 3-year hitch. And hey, they were still lying to us then, and they they lied to me then. So what they did was they put me, instead of the Pacific with the Marines, I went to the Mediterranean on a guided missile frigate with nuclear weapons. And there was a chief
with nuclear weapons, right?
a chief hospital corpsman and myself, 3rd class, and we took, you know, care of the people on board. So I soured real quick. I mean, just it didn't work. But anyhow, when I got out, because I started isolating, that we divorced in '82, and I got out the second hitch. I was released in 1973, and we were married a year. My daughter was born while I was aboard ship, my oldest daughter, and again we couldn't work it out, and we got divorced in 1982, and I actually, because I like to isolate, I didn't want to be around people. I didn't adjust at all. I started driving a truck, and I drove a truck across country for 28 years. And the reason is because you give me a set of invoices or whatever. I met one person to get the orders. I turned around and drove the truck. Didn't have to talk to anybody until delivered the product. And it worked for a lot of years. I'm still not a family man. I still live in a small house in the country. I mean, I'm surrounded by pastures. It's just what I normally do, but this guy has pulled me more out of isolation than anybody, but again, it is what it is. And it's, like I said, I am getting better. I am getting better.
What's noteworthy is I was 19 and all this stuff happened. He was 20 when we were exposed to life and death, firsthand, up front, personal, and everything else. And one of the books I have up here for you to look at, if you go to chapter 7 in this, Jim Wright talks about the emotional roller coaster, if you will, because that's the only way I can describe it, of being a corpsman. being a nurse, being a medic in Vietnam, and how traumatic that really was, above and beyond you watching your buddy get killed, or your buddy lose an arm or a leg or something like that. And then having to live with that and explain it maybe to someone later on in life, and you can't do it. I blocked off so much that I don't even remember flying home from Vietnam. I know I did, obviously. I don't remember the flight home. I don't remember Okinawa. I don't remember landing at the airport and being abused. But I do remember sitting on the beach outside of Los Angeles, California for 3 days. Never called home, never called anybody. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say, none of that. I finally got the nerve to go to a payphone, called my home in Kansas City area, collect, and said, "Mom, I'm home." She said, "What do you mean you're home?" I said, "Well, I'm home from Vietnam." "Well, how long you been home?" 3 days. "And you're just now calling?" I said, "Mom, I don't know what to say." I said, "Would you pick me up at the airport?" She did. We got in the car, and I do remember this, never said a word. From the time that picked me up at the airport to about an hour later to the house, never said a word. Had dinner with my brothers and sisters who were obviously much younger. Never said a word. That night, my brothers, 2 younger brothers, wanted me to sleep in the same bedroom as them. So it was downstairs in the basement area. So I said, okay. So got up the next morning, and my 2 brothers, younger brothers, are going, "We're never going to sleep in the same room with you again." I said, "Why?" "We don't know what happened to you over there, but we don't want to know. We don't want to be around you." He said, "You were just going nuts. You were yelling, screaming, convulsing, and all this other stuff." I don't remember any of it, but that's what they told me. And unlike Steve, I never drank in Vietnam. I never drank in 4 years in the military, but I made up for it. But I've had my issues with PTSD. I've been in through anger management, PTSD group therapy. I still have leg problems with what they call RLS, restless leg syndrome, okay, from the injuries. And for the longest period of time, I still had shrapnel, in especially my right leg, but over the years, it's pretty much worked itself out, and I don't have it anymore. But I have the consequences of that shrapnel. So there.
Well, don't you know how to, or don't you know what to tell them about how many lives we're losing, vets, Vietnam vets, so many a day?
Oh, yeah, I have a thing over here. I don't know where it is. Y'all heard about Agent Orange, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you know, more veterans have died from Agent Orange exposure than the 58,000 that actually died in the war.
Yeah.
But do you know why it was called Agent Orange? Okay. Well, Agent Orange wasn't the only agent that affected the veterans, and subsequently they died from it. There was what they referred to as the rainbow agents. And the reason why they were called that, because every one of them was a different color. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. But there was green, there was yellow, there was purple, there was white, there was blue, and of course, Agent Orange. And they're referred to as the rainbow agents. Out of the 20 million or so gallons of defoliant spread over Vietnam, most of it, like 70%, was Agent Orange. The rest were the other agents. I just called it by color. The reason why they're colors instead of the 26-letter word, no one could pronounce it. So the canisters had stripings around them, and they'd say, oh, Agent Green, Agent Blue, Agent Orange, whatever. That's where the name comes from, is the marking on the drums or the containers for the defoliant. And that's how come they were called that. And the suicide rate, you've probably heard this too, I don't know what the exact figures are, but the suicide rate for all veterans, but especially Vietnam veterans, I don't know, I've heard anywhere from 10 a day to 20 a day. But if you put the figures into perspective, more veterans have committed suicide since Vietnam than actually got killed in Vietnam or died in Vietnam. So these are things that most people don't know about, and it's hard to put in perspective. One, they weren't there. Number two, trying to relay it to people is next to impossible. It's like someone who's never had cancer trying to tell them about cancer, or being pregnant, and me trying to understand, you know, having a baby. It's just impossible. As a matter of fact, one of the jobs I had when I got back to Vietnam, I was the baby doctor. I got to deliver the babies for the Vietnamese that called at night, and we had to go pick them up at the gates, front gate or back gate, bring them onto the compound and to deliver their babies. And that was one of my jobs. Right? And like Steve said earlier, treating the Vietnamese and the enemy, we didn't have a choice. In the rear, in the hospital facility that I was in, and the mess hall and things like that, it was mandatory of our government to actually hire the Vietnamese to work with us during the daytime. And every once in a while at night, we'd come under attack. And when we recovered their bodies in the fence line or the barbed wire, whatever you want to call it, we'd find some of the guys that we paid to work for us during the day. And when we went through their pockets and everything, they'd have maps. They'd have maps. And the map would show the facility they worked in and the number of feet from that facility to the front gate or the back gate. So they'd have a map to try to get coordinates for attacking us at night. So these are some of the things that we dealt with. And again, we're only 19, 20 years old. Look at the 19 and 20-year-olds today.
Let's not.
Yeah. Good. So as we talk, we think about more things to share with you, and I hope we're not boring you, but these are some of the things that we thought we'd share with you. And again, does anyone have any questions?
What did you do in high school for sports?
I was a football player, and I played soccer. And I went to Jesuit High School in Dallas, Texas. Graduated in 1967.
Great.
Yeah. And I tried to make a comeback at the University of Missouri and play ball there. And I went out. I had, long story, but anyway, I went out with the team, and I was going to be redshirted. And they did not know about my experiences in Vietnam. They didn't know how badly my legs were and all that. And in practice, a couple of times I'd go out on a pass play, and my legs would just give out. And finally, they said, hey, you're going to go down and have x-rays. We're going to figure out what's wrong with your legs. Well, when I went down to get the x-rays, it showed these little white dots. And the doc says, what are these? I said, well, it's called shrapnel. I said, what? He said, well, yeah, I was a combat corpsman in Vietnam, and I kind of ran into shrapnel, and it's been with me ever since. And he said, son, you got a piece of shrapnel in your kneecap area. If you get hit just the right way, you're going to be paralyzed for the rest of your life. That was the end of my playing days. Okay? And so that's that. Come on, sir. Jerry, you got a question? Come on.
What did you do with the rest of your life?
Oh, I just been preparing to come up here for this.
It took that long.
Jerry, I'm a real slow study. A glacier moves quicker than this thought process. You get it? I'm slow. Okay. I got in town less than, about 24 hours ago.
Yeah.
We stop at the store to get some beverages. I walk in, and this guy has that hat on, so immediately I go and talk to him. He wanted to call 911 right away, but he stood there and listened to me. And he asked why I was in town. I said, well, I'm going to some little boat called the Silver Sides. He said, oh, I know about that. I said, what are you doing there? I said, well, I'm going to do a speech and presentation. And he knew about it. I said, good. I need someone to show up, because I don't know if anyone's going to show up. And he didn't know anything about me, so I felt pretty safe. He said, I'll be there. And I went, yeah, right. And I told Amber about it. I said, you come in town in less than a couple hours, and you got people already coming. And sure enough, he was one of the first people to show up. So thank you, Jerry, for coming. All right? So there you go. Give old Jerry a round of applause. He deserves it. So, any other questions? Come on, someone's got to ask something. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I picked up one of your things here
Yes,
that you wrote. Why, Daddy, why?
yes.
It's very, very good. Read it. It brought tears to my eyes as I was reading it. And this fella here wrote this. There's a lot of different things out there, and it just brings tears to your eyes to read these things.
Thank you.
So
The
thank you.
literature out there are writings about corpsmen and medics, all military related. I ran copies off, so help yourself to taking a couple of whatever's out there. They're free of charge, no obligation or anything. Same thing with the books up here. You can't take them, but you can take a list of the books and who wrote them and everything, so you can refer to them later on.
Well, you composed, I don't know whether that's a word or not, but you wrote more than just that too, didn't you?
Yeah, but that's the only one that's been published internationally. And
May I
Yeah.
read it aloud? Or would that-
sure,
Okay.
yeah, maybe it'll encourage someone to take them, so I don't have to take them all home with me.
I'm going to borrow your mic to do it. So
Good, because I haven't been using it very well. As you should.
Why, Daddy, why? Today I saw a Marine cry. Why, Daddy, why? He looked so tired and beaten, but proud, I cannot deny. Can you help me in understanding this tear which has escaped my eye? Son, he was not sad, but remembering days gone by, days and nights when his brothers and buddies began to die. He remembers the good old days when they were alive. He's missing them dearly now and asking why he survived. He can still taste the sweat and dirt and feel the scorching heat deep inside. He stands as tall and free as able, doing his best to express his pride. He will never forget the pain of those days. The physical and mental both left their mark. Too many restless nights he has tried to slay. And yes, son, he is afraid of the dark. He became a man in a teenager's mind, not fully understanding his country's call to arms. Feeling of guilt often leaped him blind, but he'd have do it again at the ringing of the first alarms. He remembers, too, the added pain upon his return from the portion of a nation that did not believe in the fight. Honor, integrity, patriotism were the words replaced with scorn. Believe me, son, the scars are with him all day and night. My son, today you saw a proud and heroic Marine, one who keeps fighting the fight. He's among the very best of our nations that have seen. Thank you for asking, my son. Now, good night.
Thank you.
You're double barreled now.
I'll go look out.
Yeah, you get to hear me twice, son. You're going, oh, can we leave? Thank you for reading that. I hope you enjoyed it or appreciate it. Make sure you get a copy and all that stuff out there. Anything else? Any other comments? Cheers. Yes, sir.
I have one last question that's kind of been at the back of my mind when I heard you talk about returning home
Yeah.
and
Yes.
the period of time where you didn't have contact with your family, your mother. I have a very close friend that had experiences similar to yours. And Silver Star, AA baseball player for the Pirates.
Wow.
Drafted shortly thereafter in Vietnam, major combat, and came back, and for the longest time, he really didn't want to talk about anything that happened there, understandably. Pardon me, it chokes me up. He later did, and one of the most devastating things for him was returning home, and his father never could bring himself to have a sit down with his son and talk about what really happened. Now, I don't know how that plays out in your life, but I know I played out in Dwayne.
There's returning vets. One will never talk about it. The other one is like me, and I don't mean to sound like I'm bragging to tell my story, but for me, it's a kind of a relief mechanism to get it off my chest. And maybe enlighten other people as to what people like me and Steve and other people that I've referred to over the years, at the age of 19, 20, 21, what we were doing, what we experienced, and how that has stuck with us 50, 60 years later, whatever it is. So some people just keep it inside. I kid around a lot. I know you find that hard to believe, but I kid around a lot. It's a disguise for the most part. I don't mind talking about it because it makes me feel like I'm doing something to share something with. They may or may not hear about it or want to hear about it. Like when I met Jerry yesterday, in 2 minutes, we discussed everything I just said in the last hour, right? Almost. Yeah. And I got his butt to come over here. Because now I owe him $100, but that's beside the point. Okay?
Boy, so, stay for another
With this young man, I think the thing that he explained to me was, I endured this, and yeah, I'm pissed about it. Use a few words a little stronger than that. And he said, that part of me, I'm resolving. But one of the hardest things was that personal relationship between him and his father. And the first time it struck me about how difficult it is for that parent to even hear about what their son or daughter went through, because it's so...
Well, part of that was a direct result of the negative attitude of the home front. Yeah. Oh my God, they're all over there, they're killing babies, they're doing things that, it wasn't even a declared war. Right. We haven't declared war, actual war, through Congress since June of 1942. Korea, Vietnam, Bosnia, Panama, Afghanistan, Iraq, Chicago, Portland, none of those places, those places have never been officially declared a war. They're conflicts or something like that. So I think that was part of the stigma, not only with the veterans, but with the public at large. Hey, what are we fighting for? In Vietnam, like Steve said, we couldn't tell the enemy from the good guys. In Vietnam, World War II, they knew the Germans. They knew the Japanese. They knew who they were fighting, and they had a reason to do it. And they had a goal, they had an aim, they had a target. We didn't have that in Vietnam. Oftentimes, more often than not, we were the target, okay? And the target was just to get us out of their country. In a very short period of time, and I think Steve will vouch for this and any other veteran who was in Vietnam, patriotism and all this other stuff, in about the third day, is all a bunch of crap. My job was one thing and one thing only. For me to get home as quickly and safely as possible, and the guy to my front, back, right, and left, to get them home as quickly as possible and as safe as possible. All the other stuff, the American faith, apple pie, patriotism, it was out the window. Survival was the number one issue. I know it was for me.
Yeah, once you're in country, that's what motivated a lot of us to enlist, though.
Yeah. Okay, that was the hook. And unfortunately, we shouldn't have been necessarily, but glad I did what I did when I did. So, I understand completely. I had not a very good relationship with my dad either.
Well, this kid had a wonderful relationship with his dad, and that's why it hit me so hard. His dad played for Boston, the AAA pitcher for Boston, and they were like, it was a father-son combo that you would never believe. And their dream was, okay, we're going to see him make it in Major League Baseball. And when Dwayne got back, of course he was welcomed into the family, but he never had a sit down with his dad. Son, what'd you go through there?
I know that story.
And that was an element that would never have occurred to me. You would have thought, but as a father myself now, that's got to be a hard conversation as a father too, to know that your son or daughter has endured that. It's hard to.
Well, my dad's passed away, but I think part of my situation was my dad wanted to be a Navy pilot. And he got rejected because of a heart condition. And I think that always stuck in his craw that he couldn't serve his country in World War II. So when I went and did what I did, he says, well, okay. He was proud of what I did. He just didn't want to talk about it to me. We never had that sit down talk, you know, kumbaya, hey, let's go have a beer or anything like that, that I remember, at least, okay?
Yeah.
And you shook your head and said basically the same thing?
I never remember. Now, my mother would drill me, wanting to know what went on over there and that. But my dad, if we were talking about it, he'd get up. But he had cancer when he was 13. So he had lost a big chunk of his hip. So he had a build-up shoe, and he could never serve. So, you know, he'd just get up and walk out of the room.
Well, we may need to shut this down, but I'm going to leave you with one comment, I guess, or something. But even though I have a Purple Heart and I got a Silver Star, which is the third highest award you can get, and I wear my hat almost everywhere I go, and I do it in memory of the guys that died on my shift, because I always felt bad that I couldn't save them. Okay, I couldn't rescue them and save them and all that stuff. So that's always been survivor's guilt. Okay, why me and not them? But I was a corpsman. And for me, the most gratifying periods since 1969-70, when after I came home, is out of the clear blue, getting the call. No, I got to back up. I was only there 29 days. When I went on patrols with guys, I didn't always go with the same group of guys. So I didn't get to know any of them. I didn't know Jerry's name was Jerry. I didn't build any relationships. I wasn't there long enough. Okay. One night I might go out with this row of people, next day that, next day that. And I was only in country less than a month. Out of the clear blue, and it's happened at least 5 times that I can remember off the top of my head, I'll get a call on the clear blue. Look at call ID, don't know who it is, pick it up. This HM3 Kuklenski, Oklahoma Hills, May 29th, 1969? Yeah, why? Who the hell are you? My name's Larry Lamb, or Lonnie Jameson, or David Harden. I was there that night, and you saved me. And the worst one, or best one, however you want to look at it, this is Lonnie Jameson calling, and in behalf of me, my wife, my 3 children, and 7 grandchildren, I just called to say thanks, Doc. Forget all the medals. That made it all worthwhile. So, unless you have any more questions, help yourself to all the free stuff. Yes, sir, you have a question?
I find it highly ironic, my experience in the Coast Guard versus medics. And like Thomas Moore, that did the appendectomy on the Silver Sides, had 16 weeks of corps school. And I went to boot camp, had 9 weeks of boot camp, went to Key West, Florida, lived with the Navy for 10.5 months in sonar school. I went to 10.5 months of school to work on something that, you know, is going to be okay, fine anyways, versus somebody that's going out there treating humans and doing it in 16 weeks. The irony of that is beyond me.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to bring it up, but I didn't know the time constraints. But in World War II, from September of 1942 to December 42, there were 3 emergency appendectomies performed in submarines 100 feet below the, what we got, submerged, had no other choice. These, at the time they were called pharmacist mates, did emergency appendectomies, okay, had no other choice. The first one, and the reason I'm telling you is because of the good side, bad side. It was called the, I just went blank, what's the name of it, the first one, the first submarine, Sea Dragon. No, is that what it was called? Anyway, the very first one, September 11th, 1942. The guy does the emergency operation. The guy by the name of Rector, R-E-C-T-O-R, he lived through the operation couple days later, he's back on duty, no problem. That's the good news. Bad news, 2 years later, October of 1944, he was on the USS Tang submarine. And if you don't know anything about the Tang, Tang was the #1 submarine in World War II that sunk the most tonnage of foreign ships in all of World War II. In October of 42, 2 years later, the Tang had the misfortune of firing a torpedo, and it must have been put together by a bunch of Polacks or something, because the thing boomeranged and came back and sank the Tang. Huh?
Yeah, I agree.
It's my program, be quiet. Unfortunately, Rector, who survived the emergency appendectomy, he was on the Tang when it got exploded and he got killed. And the one on the Silver Sides, Thomas Moore, he did the operation. They refer to it sometimes as the holiday or Christmas emergency operation because it was, I think, December 22nd or 3rd of 1942. All three of those, I call them corpsmen. Corpsmen were reprimanded. Matter of fact, they went to court-martial for doing this. Their senior medical personnel, you guys can't do that. So, well, good. What do you want me to do? Let him die? So they saved him, and they didn't court-martial. Smarter people came on board and said, no, we don't want to do that. And if I'm not mistaken, every one of them were promoted and given a Navy Commendation Medal for their efforts. So these are the type of things corpsmen did. Okay?
And tomorrow he's going to actually see the table where the surgery was performed on Mr. Planter on the Silver Sides.
Yeah.
You can actually sit down there at the table and see exactly where that's taken.
It was only one of the three that was filmed. That's why it's so significant. And they've got the history here.
The little follow-on to that is that the medical brass went wild. They says, you want to kill these people? Or the words to that effect. Well, they're going to die anyways.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And you had a chance to save them. Then the thinking at the time was, well, okay, there was a movement afoot there amongst the medical brass to force the crewmen on submarines to have a prophylactic appendectomy, I believe is the term, or something to that effect. They'd all have their appendixes taken out so they wouldn't have that issue.
Oh, I never heard that.
And what's the morbidity rate on an appendectomy? It's a small chance that you're going to die.
Yeah.
Times the number of thousands of people that served in the subs. You're going to force them into an appendectomy, and the non-medical people, I don't know how far it went up the hierarchy, but they said, no, we need to do that.
The Silver Sides was officially the last one that was performed. You don't read about it anymore.
Nope.
And back to something about coming out of Corps school. Just like, that was 80 years ago. Okay? Things were really primitive back then. Submarines, or even today, it would not be the best of circumstances to do any type of surgery on a submarine. But I just lost my thought.
That's what happens when you get old.
Yeah. Are you speaking from experience?
Yes, sir.
Of being old? Okay. I can forgive you then. I had some. Oh, when you graduated from Corps school, it was not uncommon for the corpsmen in World War II and Vietnam and Korea to go straight to a ship, like Steve did. And on that ship, there were no doctors. There were no MDs. It was the corpsmen, and that was it. And that was their only lifeline for any medical situations whatsoever. So, right in line with what you're saying.
Well, I would like to thank tonight's speakers. They were very moving and passionate, and I hope everyone that is here in the room or that watches this on YouTube later on will get a feeling of what it was like so that they can take that moment and say thank you and give some respect to those that did so much for our country. And at this point, I'd like to say thank you very much.
Thank you, literature.